You can't do anything about it. You can't change that, right? We, as outsiders, probably have even less power to change it in some regards, except through things like economic sanctions and through trying to convince people to subvert them so that the filters are more costly than they are effective. I think that is probably a better option than economic sanctions because, frankly, if you can get past the filter, that's it. It's done. They're not going to spend a lot of money on an arms war. But if you think that it's helpful to contact people, here are the chief executive officers of NetFilter, or this NetSweeper software, right? So you can contact them and let them know that you think they're a bunch of motherfuckers for selling their software to the Qataris. Now, it could be the case that it's not them. But, you know, one way to ask is to call and clarify. So I have an interest in Iran. Specifically, I have an interest in outright violence against people that are basically peacefully protesting. I think that it's pretty much completely unacceptable to shoot people when they're protesting. I think that in general, Guy Debord was right. People protest to make themselves feel better, and they generally don't make any social change. But it's pretty clear that in Iran, in the latest uprisings that have happened, this is not the case. Those protests were actually effective. And those protests were not just to make people feel better, and the government responded accordingly. The Iranians actually had one of my machines pulled off the internet because they did not appreciate the scanning that I was doing. So I put several more machines back online and doubled up my efforts. If you would like this scan data, I would be more than happy to give it to you. I scanned basically every host in Iran. And I'll tell you about their police network in a minute. So basically what happens in Iran is they have a knob, right? They say, okay, social unrest is high. We're going to turn the internet down. And then they turn the internet back up. They make certain services unreliable. They filter certain things. They do some pretty nasty stuff, I think. And as we learned earlier, they are at least telling people they're watching everyone, and they certainly have the capability to do so. Arbor Networks released a really interesting report that talked about how they pulled a bunch of data lines and then they put them back in about a gigabit at a time. And that's about the capacity that filters have. So they basically replugged in each filter, got new transit upstream through, say, Russia or other places, and those new connections, each one was like a clean feed, so to speak. And so it's definitely the case that they have some interesting government level filters. But then, just like the Great Firewall of China, they also have ISP level filters. So the filtering that you see at one level is not necessarily the result of like an all-seeing, all-perfect government or an all-seeing, all-perfect ISP. It's some combination of them, and you can get past all of it. So I'd like to take a moment to point out that Nokia is part of the problem, and we are also part of the problem. Because Nokia has justified their use of wiretapping software and their necessity to build it into their products because the West requires it for things like CALIA. So what we are doing when we make a trade-off in our society about wiretapping is that we are making that trade-off for people that do not have the rights, the responsibilities, or the abilities to make that trade-off in their own society. So Nokia says they are building wiretapping infrastructure into their equipment because we require it. And so it's, of course, ethical to sell it to the Iranians. And I think that they are right in that we are part of the problem and that we should not be forcing them to do that here and certainly not there. Because, in fact, an unintended consequence that costs people their lives is the fact that that wiretapping equipment is used to watch people, to gather information about people, to target them, and to kill them, straight up. And that's our responsibility to fix, right? Now, we're not in Finland, but of course, if you've ever seen a Nokia telephone switch, if you've ever seen Nokia telephones, if you've ever seen Nokia products, we are part of that ecosystem. And I think it's up to us to fix it. If you'd like to see and confirm the telecom software they're using, there's the IP address, 80.191.2.0/24. Take a look. Another one, if you're interested in the besieged militia that shot Netta in the heart, that nice girl who wasn't even part of a protest, webmail.besiege.ir. Those people are the ones that shot her. Feel free to take a look. They run Horde as their webmail system. Code execution is possible. Wondering about the people that are protecting her? Let's see. You might be interested in smsmonitoring.itrc.ac.ir. You might also be interested in some of the SIP proxy information and the media proxy. These are the censorship and Spook Central hosts that are of interest. They are not filtered. They are not firewalled. You pop a shell in these boxes, you own the Iranian government. You know, just saying. So, I mean, I think that you cannot just simply stand idly by when you see stuff like this happening in the world, right? You can't be neutral on a moving train. You are, in fact, choosing to do something by doing nothing. So I think that if you're here, you're already choosing to do something, and you can continue. So Andy Muller from the CCC gave me this image, and I think it's pretty great, right? When people are talking about what they're doing abstractly, it is not so useful. I mean, it's nice to talk about what Nokia is doing, but let's face it. This is what Nokia is helping to enable. This is what Siemens is helping to enable. This is what we, as a society, are exporting to them. And I think that we should ask whether or not that's what we want. I feel like the privileges and freedom that we enjoy in the United States, in Canada, in Western Europe, and in other parts of the world, they shouldn't be taken for granted. And we do sort of take them for granted and forget that it is, in fact, us that have created this just as much as we create other things. So I'd like to share a funny story. This Iranian black hat popped on an IRC channel where I am, and he says, hey, I want to tell you about a bug. I think you should put this into Tor because it would be really useful. And I didn't think it was a good idea to put it into Tor. No one else really did, but it is extremely funny. Their filters literally did not know the difference between get without spaces and get with spaces. So GET space torproject.org, blocked. G space E space T space torproject.org, totally not blocked. Right? So their filters are actually trivial to bypass in multiple ways. And there's this group called the Green Anti-Sec group, which is like, I don't even know why they picked that name, but whatever. They released a small proxy, and all it does is take all of your requests and split them. So it's a super simple, low-tech, I mean, just really easy. But because we know that people are clearly monitoring them, it's a super bad idea to use that technique. It's just funny to let you know about the code quality of these proxies and to let you know how they're kind of shoddy and how they're put together. But that, I think, is even more scary because I'm sure that they're also compromised. I mean, it's probably not too much effort to compromise them. And most of this is technologically quite simple. But socially, it is in some ways simple, and in other ways it is extremely effective. And we have to work towards changing the social norms. I mean, one of the interesting things is the bigger the censorship becomes, the tighter this gets, you actually find that people resist it more. You find normal people are not able to search for things like breast cancer research or certain things about women's liberation or the things that they need to do their homework. And this causes them to reject the filter. And these are people that aren't activists, they're just normal people. So there's sort of like a normalization phase that's taking place with a lot of filters around the world. And I think that we can be part of that dialogue to change that, because I think that part of that normalization should be the removal of the filters. Because not only do they present a serious risk to people on the internet, they, in some way, are saying, we will allow the marginalization of this percentage of our society based on some authoritarian, non-transparent idea. And I think that that is really dangerous. So I want to show an example of Burma, because I think that Burma is quite interesting. The military junta purchased some Fortinet software called FortiGuard, and they denied it at first. This is one of their salespeople handing Fortinet gear to the military junta on television. They stopped denying it. So they apparently are gone. I think it's the OpenNet initiative that said that they aren't there, or it could be Peacefire, I forget exactly who. But that to me says that it's good that they were able to get out of that. But if you scan Burma, which by the way, they have about 180 hosts that are reachable from the internet. They have 2 net blocks that are of considerable size, and 180 computers can be reached. Everything else is filtered, like entirely. No packets get through. And now it's mostly just Cisco routers with the remote login enabled. So, I mean, there's something to be learned from that, right? Which is that, you know, we complain, and some companies change their behavior, but ultimately, not everything is going to change overnight. We can make small victories, but we can't exactly make Burma completely uncensored overnight. I mean, we can try. There are people that use Tor in Burma, I hear. I have never been to Burma. I will probably never go to Burma. But it does seem to me that people can subvert them But part of the problem is us again. I mean, Cisco is a big multinational corporation, and they don't seem to care